I have the vague impression you didn't get on very well with your father.
Yeah, that was right.
Why was that?
Because he was not proud of me. He never said, I love you. He never said, I'm proud of you. Never. So, well, that's not nice. Therefore, I say,
André Rieu, the man millions call the King of Waltz, has spent decades enchanting audiences all over the world. From sold-out stadiums to intimate outdoor concerts in his beloved Maastricht, Rieu's music has crossed borders, languages, and generations. His cheerful, larger-than-life presence seemed unstoppable. Until now. In recent months, fans began to notice worrying signs. First came the cancelled concerts, vague explanations about health issues. Then the swirling rumors. Was André okay? Was it serious? Would he ever return to the stage the same way again? What the public didn't know was that behind the bright lights and standing ovations, André Rieu was facing one of the darkest and most emotional chapters of his life. And at the center of it all was his son, Pierre. The boy who had once stood proudly in the wings, now stepping forward with a revelation that would leave André and the world shaken. He's not just a legend, Pierre would later say. He's my father, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. But to truly understand how everything came to this breaking point, you have to go back. Back to a lifetime built on ambition, discipline, and a dangerous refusal to slow down. A lifetime devoted to music and pushing beyond limits. André Rieu didn't just love music, he lived it. From the time he first picked up a violin as a small boy to leading one of the biggest private orchestras in the world, Rieu's life was a whirlwind of rehearsals, tours, and endless standing ovations. But this success came at a cost most people never saw. Decades of constant touring, traveling across continents at a relentless pace, began to wear down even André's famously energetic spirit. In 2010, a terrifying incident nearly ended his career. A vestibular nerve infection caused him to suffer from severe dizziness, making it impossible to perform. Fans were heartbroken. For the first time, the man who made the world dance could barely stand. I was spinning in my bed, he confessed. I couldn't walk. I couldn't even lift my violin. Despite recovering, André didn't learn to slow down. If anything, the experience made him more determined. He launched himself back into grueling schedules, taking his orchestra across the globe, Asia, Australia, South America, North America. Each tour bigger and more demanding than the last. His mindset? Full throttle, no breaks. I'll rest when I'm dead, he joked once. But even he didn't realize how close he was to pushing his body too far. And while André was living life at full speed, someone was watching quietly from the sidelines. Someone who knew better than anyone what this pace was doing to him. His son, Pierre. The sun in the shadows. If André was the face of the empire, Pierre Rieu was its hidden backbone. As André's son, manager, and trusted confidant, Pierre had traveled every road, sat through every negotiation, and patched every crisis for decades. To the public, Pierre was simply the son. But behind closed doors, he carried the weight of an empire, and the growing fear that his father was racing toward disaster. Their bond was undeniable. They joked, argued, and built one of the most successful musical careers of all time. Yet even the strongest family ties can strain under pressure. Pierre found himself torn between two roles. The dutiful son who helped his father chase every dream, and the worried son who saw the toll it was taking. "There's this image of my father as eternal," Pierre once said. "But I see the man. I see the price he's paying." For years, Pierre stayed silent, believing he could protect his father by keeping the machine running. But the cracks were beginning to show, and the breaking point wasn't far off. And that breaking point would come not with a whisper, but with a collapse. Under the high-altitude skies of Mexico, where André's body finally screamed, "Enough!" When the body says no more. The Mexico tour was supposed to be a triumph. André Rieu and his orchestra were welcomed like royalty. The audiences were electric. But behind the scenes, something was wrong. The brutal combination of high altitude, jet lag, non-stop performances, and the stubborn drive to power through caught up to André in a devastating way. After one triumphant performance, he collapsed backstage, dizzy, shaking, barely able to stand. The mood shifted instantly. Crew members rushed to help. Medical teams were called. Panic was in the air. For the first time, even the most seasoned team members realized this wasn't just exhaustion. It was something far more dangerous. Pierre stepped forward and made the painful decision. They had to cancel the rest of the tour, and he wasn't going to sugarcoat it anymore. Facing the press and fans with a heavy heart, Pierre said, "It was simply too much. His body couldn't handle it. We ignored the warning signs for too long." Backstage, André reportedly broke down, overwhelmed not just by physical pain, but by guilt. For the first time in his life, the king of Waltz had been forced to admit defeat. And in the quiet days that followed, a harder question surfaced, one that would haunt both father and son. Had they made a terrible mistake by pushing too hard for too long? Whispers of regret. Was it all a mistake? In the stillness after the cancelled tour, regrets began to creep in. André, once the eternal optimist, confided in close friends and family that he was starting to doubt himself. Had chasing dreams come at too high a price? Were the long-haul flights, the endless rehearsals, the impossible schedules really worth risking everything? Private conversations with his wife, Marjorie, grew more serious. She had always been André's quiet anchor, but even she couldn't hide her fear now. She reportedly urged him to consider smaller tours, fewer shows, less pressure. "He's a brilliant man," she once said, "but even the brightest stars can burn out if they never rest." Pierre, too, wrestled with his own guilt. He had helped build this empire, cheered every new tour, signed off on every crazy schedule. Now, watching his father in pain, he couldn't help but wonder if he had failed to protect him. The seeds of resentment were also beginning to take root. Father and son, once perfectly aligned, were now facing hard truths and harder choices. Could André admit he wasn't invincible? Could Pierre find the courage to speak up louder? And then, just when things seemed most fragile, Pierre did something no one expected. He stepped into the spotlight and revealed a transformation that would leave even his legendary father in tears. The son's unexpected transformation. For years, Pierre Rieu had been the steady force behind his father's world tours, quietly managing the chaos so André could simply focus on music. But after Mexico, something inside Pierre shifted, and for the first time, he spoke up publicly, not just as a manager, but as a concerned son. In a rare emotional statement, Pierre broke the usual polished tone he used with the media. He spoke not just about the cancelled concerts, but about the bigger picture. André's health, the risks they were taking, and the need for change. "He's not just my father," Pierre said with tears in his voice. He's a fragile man now. It was a stunning moment. Fans who had always seen André as invincible were left shocked. For decades, Pierre had supported every decision, pushed every boundary to keep the show on the road. Now he was urging caution, even gently challenging the very system they had built together. It wasn't betrayal. It was love. A fierce kind of love that sometimes means telling someone the hard truth they don't want to hear. And when André heard his son's words, something inside him cracked, leading to a moment of vulnerability the world never expected to see from the King of Waltz. A father's tears, breaking the legend's spirit. André Rieu, the man known for smiling through rainstorms and technical disasters, for rallying massive crowds with a wave of his bow, couldn't hold back his emotions anymore. Backstage, away from the cameras and the glittering lights, André reportedly broke down in tears after hearing Pierre's emotional statement. Witnesses described it as a heartbreaking scene, the legend, the titan, crumbling under the weight of exhaustion, regret, and deep, aching love. One crew member recalled, "We'd never seen him cry like that. He always found a way to make things seem okay. But this time, it wasn't okay." For André, it wasn't just the collapse of a tour. It was the realization that he had spent years building something extraordinary, but at a great personal cost. And now, even his beloved son was begging him to slow down. It's hard to let go of control when your entire identity has been wrapped around perseverance and performance. But for the first time in a long time, André wasn't thinking about sold-out stadiums or roaring applause. He was thinking about family, about health, about the life he still had ahead of him. And as those tears dried, André began facing an even harder truth. Chasing dreams comes with a price, and sometimes it's higher than anyone ever admits. The cost of chasing dreams, health versus legacy. Pushing through pain had been part of André's life philosophy for years. He wore exhaustion like a badge of honor. But now, the costs were undeniable. Physically, the warning signs were everywhere. Dizzy spells, shaking hands, moments of near collapse that couldn't be brushed off anymore. Even off stage, he battled depression, nights where the music couldn't drown out the creeping loneliness of recovery. André wasn't just responsible for himself. He had a massive orchestra, a crew, and thousands of fans counting on him. Financially and emotionally, the burden was enormous. He always says he plays not for himself, but for all of us, one longtime violinist said. But we would rather have him healthy than heroic. Pierre's quiet plea grew louder. It was time to slow down, before slowing down was no longer a choice. It wasn't about quitting, it was about surviving, about living to see future concerts, future summers, future grandchildren's laughter. And the tragedy was, this wasn't the first time history had tried to warn André, because haunting echoes from the past were now repeating themselves with chilling familiarity. The echoes of 2016. If Mexico was a wake-up call, then 2016 was the missed warning that should have changed everything. Back then, André had been forced to cancel concerts, not because of personal illness, but due to grief. Two close colleagues, members of his musical family, had passed away unexpectedly. Their deaths shook him to the core. Still, even in the depths of sorrow, André barely rested. He pushed forward with his trademark optimism, refusing to admit just how deeply he was hurting. "Music heals," he said at the time. But sometimes, music can also hide the wounds. The same patterns replayed during his vestibular nerve infection years earlier. Minor symptoms were ignored. Then, suddenly, the body rebelled, violently, unmistakably. Now, in Mexico, the old ghosts had returned. The lesson he hadn't learned back then was now staring him in the face. Pushing through grief, exhaustion, and warning signs didn't make him a hero. It made him human, vulnerable, breakable. And it wasn't just André who was suffering. His entire team, the people who had built this dream with him, were crumbling too. But nobody dared speak. Until now. The crew's silent suffering behind every magical André Rieu concert were 125 people. Musicians, sound engineers, lighting experts, stagehands, who traveled the world with him. And behind their smiling faces was a shared secret. They were exhausted too. The Mexico tour pushed everyone to their limits. High altitudes left many dizzy and gasping for air. Nosebleeds became common. Some crew members fainted from exhaustion. Yet night after night, they powered through. Because that's what you did when you were part of André's dream. We survived night by night, one exhausted stagehand admitted, but it wasn't sustainable. The guilt weighed heavily on André. This wasn't just about him anymore. His dream had become a machine. And that machine was grinding down the very people he loved. Even worse, many crew members were too loyal to speak up. They didn't want to disappoint the man who had given them careers, friendships, memories. They kept smiling, kept performing, until their bodies gave out too. For André, realizing this truth was another devastating blow. His love of music had never been selfish, but now he saw that love alone wasn't enough to protect the people around him from the dangers of pushing too hard for too long. And so, facing the reality of what had been lost and what could still be saved, André and Pierre made a heartbreaking but necessary decision. A new future was coming. The new reality. No more grand tours. After everything, the collapse in Mexico, the health scares, Pierre's emotional plea, there was no escaping it anymore. The days of globe-trotting concerts, long-haul flights, and brutal back-to-back performances had to end. It was a heartbreaking realization for André Rieu, a man who had built an empire on his ability to take his music to the farthest corners of the earth. In a press conference filled with tension and bittersweet honesty, Pierre stepped up and confirmed what many fans had feared. Mexico might have been the final far-flung tour for his father. "We will be focusing on concerts closer to home," Pierre announced gently, standing beside his father. "Maastricht will remain, but long-distance tours are no longer realistic." It wasn't just words. It was an emotional shift. For André, who had always said he wanted to bring joy to every country that would have him, this was the first time he openly admitted the limits of his own body. His dream wasn't dying, but it was changing. Instead of vast world tours, there would be more concerts centered in Europe. More time spent in the beloved hometown of Maastricht, where André's career had truly blossomed. There would still be music, still be magic, but in a way that prioritized health, family, and sanity. Privately, André confided to friends, "I can still feel the music. I can still play, but I must listen to my son, to my body, to life itself." The fans' reactions were a complex mix of sadness and understanding. Of course, they longed to see him perform in person, but deep down, they knew it was better to have fewer concerts than to risk losing him altogether. And as André adjusted to this slower pace, he found unexpected ways to heal, turning to something surprisingly simple, yet profoundly human, to fill the long, silent hours. Baking, family, and new beginnings. It might sound impossible to imagine the King of Waltz swapping his baton for a rolling pin. But that's exactly what André Rieu did during his recovery. And it was no small thing. In those early days of enforced rest, when music had to take a back seat to health, André felt restless. The stage had been his life for so long. Suddenly being told to slow down left a gaping hole he didn't know how to fill. At first, it was simple. Baking bread. Then pastries, then elaborate cakes. It wasn't about mastering recipes or impressing anyone. It was about creating something, feeling connected to life again, after feeling so frighteningly fragile. "I couldn't tour," André admitted in a rare interview, "but I could knead dough. I could create warmth in my home when I couldn't create it on a stage." Family became his new center. His wife Marjorie, always his greatest anchor, encouraged these small victories. His grandchildren became a daily source of laughter and purpose. Slowly, the man who had spent decades racing from city to city found peace in standing still. There were long walks through the gardens, quiet afternoons spent reading, something André had rarely had time for before. And of course, dreams. Dreams of a future not just filled with music, but with real, sustainable happiness. One of André's most charming quotes from this time captures his spirit perfectly. "I want to live until 140. There's so much life to live, and it's not just on stage." His unstoppable spirit hadn't vanished. It had simply found a new rhythm, a new way to keep beating without breaking. And yet, even as André found this new balance, the world still wondered, was this the end of the concerts, the magic, the man they had loved for so long? Or was it merely a new beginning, written at a slower, more meaningful tempo? A farewell? Or just a new tempo? The rumors started quickly. André Rieu was retiring. André Rieu was finished. André Rieu would never step on a stage again. But none of that was true. Yes, the grand world tours were ending. Yes, the pace would change forever. But in his heart, André made a vow to himself, to his family, and to his fans. "I will never stop playing," he said. "Music is who I am. But I will choose my health, my family, and my love of life first." This wasn't a farewell. It was an evolution. Instead of grueling months-long tours across continents, André would focus on key concerts, especially the famous Maastricht summer concerts that had become legendary. Performances where fans from all over the world could come to him, gathering in one place like a musical pilgrimage. The stage would still light up. The orchestra would still soar. But now, it would be on André's terms, healthier, happier, and filled with even more gratitude for every note he played. Pierre's courageous transformation, the son who dared to tell his father to slow down, had ultimately saved not just a man, but a legacy. André understood that now, more clearly than ever. Fans' reactions mirrored that bittersweet hope. There was heartbreak, yes, but also overwhelming support. Letters, videos, and social media posts poured in from around the globe, thanking André not just for his music, but for choosing life, family, and love. One fan's message summed it up perfectly. "We don't love you for how many concerts you play. We love you for how deeply you make us feel. Take care of yourself, Maestro. We'll be here, always." André's final message in interviews resonated with that same tender honesty. The music will go on. But so must love, so must family, so must health. The King of Waltz hadn't abdicated his throne. He had simply slowed his steps so he could dance through life a little longer, with grace, with heart, and with his beloved son right beside him. And so, with a slower tempo, but a heart full of dreams, André Rieu turns the page. Not a farewell, just a different kind of song.